You are sitting on the edge of the bed. You have one shoe in your hand, you are staring at the floor, and your mind is racing through a catalog of rationalizations. You are trying to explain away what is happening to your body. You tell yourself it is the stress of the quarter closing at work. You tell yourself it was the heavy meal you ate at 8 o'clock. You tell yourself that you are just carrying too much mental weight right now. You build a fortress of logical excuses because the alternative is to look directly at the reality that your physical response is fading. You put your shoe on, you stand up, and you make a silent decision. You decide you are going to manage this entirely on your own. You are going to figure out a workaround. You're going to find a quick fix, and you are never going to talk about it with anyone. I know the exact architecture of that silence. I know how heavy it is because I carried it for years. When I was in my early 50s building my career as a corporate sales executive, I spent my life managing crises. I traveled from Austin to Denver to Chicago. I negotiated contracts. I managed difficult clients, and I prided myself on my ability to control outcomes. I was a man who believed that if you applied enough leverage, enough intellect, and enough willpower, you could bend any situation to your advantage. When my body started to stall, when that automatic morning response disappeared and my predictability in the bedroom vanished, I treated it like a bad quarter. I went into crisis management mode. And because I was operating out of pure panic and bruised pride, I did exactly what millions of men do. I started doing things that actively accelerated the breakdown of my own machinery. If you are an older man and you are noticing that the engine is not starting the way it used to, there is a very specific list of reactions you have to avoid. I am not talking about avoiding certain foods. I am talking about avoiding the behavioral traps that will absolutely destroy your confidence, your relationship, and your underlying health. The very first thing you must avoid, and the trap that did the most damage in my own life, is the strategy of the cover-up. When things stop working, your immediate instinct is to hide the failure from your partner. In my first marriage, I became a professional at creating artificial distance. Because I could not guarantee that my body would cooperate on any given night, I decided the safest route was to just avoid the road. I stopped initiating. But I could not tell her why I was stopping, so I had to invent reasons for the distance. I would pick petty arguments over the logistics of the house just to create a cold atmosphere. I would stay up until 1 in the morning watching television programs I did not even like, just waiting for her to fall asleep so I could slip into bed unnoticed. I blamed my travel schedule. I blamed exhaustion. When you avoid the conversation, you do not protect your dignity. You just leave your partner in the dark, spinning her own theories. She does not know about your physical panic. She just sees a husband who no longer looks at her, who snaps at her over small things, and who is constantly pulling away. She internalizes it. She assumes she is the problem. And because you are too proud to admit that your infrastructure is failing, you let her believe that lie. That silent misunderstanding built a wall in my house that we never managed to tear down. You have to avoid the silence. The silence will kill the marriage long before the physical issue does. The second thing you absolutely must avoid is the chemical patch. When the panic sets in, almost every man eventually finds his way to a doctor and asks for the prescription. We want the little pill in the orange bottle. We want the override switch. I did exactly the same thing. I sat in a pharmacy parking lot, holding that paper bag, feeling a mix of relief and deep, hollow defeat. I thought I had solved the problem. But when you rely on a chemical patch, you are treating a massive systemic failure as if it were a minor local inconvenience. You are trying to put a new coat of paint on a house that has a cracked foundation. When you use the pill, you do not regain your confidence. You actually lose it entirely because your confidence is now outsourced to a chemical. You live in constant fear of the patch failing. You have to time the dosage. You have to deal with the side effects, the flushed face, the headache. Intimacy becomes a scheduled clinical event rather than a natural occurrence. But the physical danger is even worse. I had to learn that an erection is not a sexual event. It is a cardiovascular event. It relies on the health and elasticity of your blood vessels. Your blood vessels are lined with a single layer of cells called the endothelium, which produces a gas called nitric oxide. That gas is the signal that tells the pipes to open up and let blood rush in. When your erections start fading, it is your body warning you that the endothelial lining is damaged. The factory has stopped producing the signal. The pipes are rigid and clogged with the byproducts of chronic stress and poor sleep. When you take a pill, you're artificially forcing heavy blood flow through rigid, damaged pipes. You are not clearing the rust. You are not repairing the factory. You are just redlining a failing engine. If you do that long enough without fixing the underlying cardiovascular health, eventually the pill will stop working entirely. I reached that point, and when the chemical override fails, the panic you feel is absolute. You have to avoid relying on the patch. You have to fix the plumbing. The third trap you must avoid is the belief that a fading physical response is just the inevitable result of your age. We tell ourselves this lie to avoid taking responsibility for our daily habits. We say, well, I am 58 now, this is just what happens. Things slow down. The parts wear out. We accept a life of diminished capacity because it is easier than doing the work of cardiovascular maintenance. I believed that lie until I started reading about how the machine actually operates. Age is a factor, yes. The factory is not as resilient as it was when you were 20. But the loss of function is not caused by the calendar. It is caused by the accumulation of damage. I had spent 30 years living on adrenaline. I operated on 4 hours of sleep. I drank massive amounts of dark roast coffee while severely dehydrated. I carried a baseline level of corporate stress that kept my body flooded with cortisol. Cortisol and adrenaline are powerful vasoconstrictors. They tell your blood vessels to clamp shut. For 3 decades, I had been sending my body a constant chemical signal to restrict my blood flow. It was not my age that was shutting down my system. It was my lifestyle. Realizing that was terrifying, but it was also the turning point of my life. Because if the damage was caused by my habits, it meant the damage could be repaired by changing them. If you accept that you are just old, you surrender. If you accept that your infrastructure is compromised, you can start rebuilding it. The fourth thing you must avoid is trying to punish your body back into shape. When an older man realizes he is losing his physical edge, his ego usually drives him to the gym. He decides he is going to reclaim his youth through sheer force. He tries to lift heavy weights the way he did in college. He tries to run miles on hard pavement. He pushes himself to the point of absolute physical exhaustion. I did this. I thought I needed to break my body down to build it back up. What I did not understand was the role of the autonomic nervous system. When you put a compromised, aging body through intense, punishing physical stress, your brain reads that stress as a threat. It dumps even more cortisol into your bloodstream. You are trying to force your blood vessels to open up, but your workout is actually causing them to clamp down harder. You have to avoid punishment. You have to shift your entire philosophy from exhaustion to circulation. I stopped lifting heavy. I stopped running. I started walking. I take long, brisk walks through the desert trails near my house in Scottsdale every single day. There is a mechanical reason for this. When you walk at a steady, elevated pace, your heart pumps a high volume of blood through your arteries. That rushing blood creates physical friction against the walls of the blood vessels. It rubs against the endothelial cells. That mechanical friction is the exact trigger that tells the factory to wake up and start manufacturing nitric oxide again. I am not walking to look young. I am walking to manually clear the rust out of my supply lines. The fifth and final thing you must avoid is treating your sleep as a luxury. For my entire career in sales, I wore sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. I thought needing 8 hours was a sign of weakness. I thought I was getting ahead of the competition by working until midnight and waking up at 5 in the morning. I was actually just destroying my own repair cycle. The endothelial lining, the tissue that controls your entire vascular system, only heals when you are in deep, uninterrupted sleep. That is the only time your stress hormones drop low enough for the maintenance crew to come in and fix the damage you did during the day. Furthermore, the morning erection you used to have is actually a diagnostic test. When you are in deep sleep, the brain sends a signal to flush the system with oxygenated blood to keep the tissue healthy. If you are cutting your sleep short, or if your sleep is fragmented, you never enter the phase where that test happens. You are firing the maintenance crew before they even get to work. I had to completely overhaul how I handled the dark hours. I stopped bringing my laptop into the bedroom, but the most critical change I made was addressing how I breathed at night. I realized I was a chronic mouth breather. I would wake up with a dry mouth, feeling groggy. I learned that nitric oxide is produced in massive quantities in the nasal cavity. When you breathe through your nose, you pull that vital gas directly into your lungs and bloodstream, keeping your vessels open and relaxed all night. When you breathe through your mouth, you bypass that completely. I started using a small piece of medical tape to hold my lips closed at night. It sounds absurd. The first week it felt claustrophobic, but I forced myself to stick with it. By the second week, the change was undeniable. My resting heart rate dropped. I woke up feeling a depth of physical rest I had not known in decades. I was finally giving my cardiovascular system the exact environment it needed to run its diagnostics. When you stop doing these 5 things, when you stop hiding, when you drop the pill, when you reject the excuse of age, when you stop punishing your body, and when you protect your sleep, the mechanics of your life begin to change. I am going to be completely honest with you about the timeline. When you have spent decades ignoring the maintenance schedule of your own body, you are not going to clear the rust out of the pipes in a week. When I started walking, taping my mouth, and hydrating with salt water first thing in the morning, the silence remained. For the first few months, I was still waking up to a cold engine. It is deeply frustrating. It is the exact moment where your mind tells you to just quit, go back to the pharmacy, and accept defeat. But I kept visualizing the infrastructure. I kept telling myself that healing takes time. It was about 4 months into this process. I woke up early one morning before the sun was up. The house was quiet, and I felt a pulse. It was faint. It was not the roaring response of a 20-year-old, but it was there. It was a physical signal that the system was trying to run the diagnostic test. The factory was finally producing enough nitric oxide to get the message through the lines. I laid there in the dark, and a massive weight lifted off my chest. I realized my body was not permanently broken. The engine still wanted to run. It just needed me to stop sabotaging it. Over the next year, the consistency returned. The mornings became predictable again. And the psychological shift that comes with that mechanical recovery changes everything about how you walk through the world. I am married to Alyssa now. She is 9 years younger than me. She is a woman who values directness, and she has zero tolerance for men who hide behind their pride. My daughter Lila, who is 27 and works as a brand strategist, always tells me that my generation of men would rather die quietly than admit we are struggling. She is right. But because of what I went through, because I understand the cardiovascular reality of my own biology, I do not hide with Alyssa. When we first got together, I was still in the middle of rebuilding this system. I sat her down and I told her the truth. I told her about the supply lines. I told her what I was doing to fix the plumbing. I explained that if the engine was slow to respond on a given night, it had nothing to do with my attraction to her and everything to do with clearing out a lifetime of bad corporate habits. She did not pity me. She respected the ownership. She became my partner in the process. We removed the performance anxiety from the house. If we are exhausted, we go to sleep. If things are slow, we do not panic. The absolute lack of pressure allows my nervous system to stay in the parasympathetic state. I am not flooding my body with adrenaline in my own bedroom anymore. I look at my son Ethan. He is 31, grinding his gears in commercial real estate, running on caffeine and stress, building the exact same walls I built. I do not lecture him, but I drop hints about infrastructure. I tell him that every skipped hour of sleep is a withdrawal from an account that he will eventually have to pay back. I want him to protect his foundation now, and I look at the guys my own age. I see them carrying that quiet resignation. I know they are staring at the ceiling in the dark, wondering if their physical lives are just over. They do not have to be over. If you are an older man and the engine is stalling, you have to stop avoiding the reality of it. You have to stop doing the things that are choking your own system. Put down the chemical patch. Stop accepting the excuse of your age. Stop punishing your joints at the gym. Start taping your mouth at night and protecting your deep sleep. Start walking every single day to wake up the endothelium. It will require patience. It will require you to forgive your body for struggling and to forgive yourself for neglecting it for so long. But the machine is incredibly resilient. If you clear the lines, if you change the environment, and if you stop treating the symptoms, the system can come back online. Do not spend the next decade in silence. Read the dashboard. Start the maintenance tomorrow morning. Simple as that.